Hey guys, this is John from US Dash Camera. Today I got a review on one of my DJI drones I bought earlier this year, and this is sort of going to be a impressions video on just as a beginner what it's been like to buy this new DJI drone, my experience with it, the difficulties or ease of use for people that haven't used drones before, because there's a lot of great YouTubers already out there. So this isn't going to be a in-depth guide on how to use every feature of these drones. The model I bought, which I'm going to be showing mostly, is the DJI Mavic Air 2. So I picked up this drone off Amazon around April of this year for $800. It was normally $1,000 for that Fly More combo, and when I saw that 20% price drop, I decided to purchase it. Another model available, which is an upgraded version of the Air 2, is called the Air 2S. That model is $300 more, so I didn't really want to spend $500 more when I had that 20% off. At the time, I wasn't aware of the Mini 3 Pro, which is another drone to consider, because for the price that you can purchase that, it is a very capable drone and probably a better option than the Air 2. And for many people, it might even be better than the Air 2S. Now, the reason I wanted to make this video more about my early impressions of flying a drone as a complete beginner in 2022 is because as soon as I told people I had one, people had all sorts of questions, and like what kind of features they have and what kind of camera it has, what happens if you crash, things like that. So I know anyone that knows about drones is gonna know that there's other brands other than DJI. There's several other big companies, but DJI is the most popular, and I think it's for a reason. They have made a name in themselves in the industry, and they make a lot of really high quality drones. So I'm not going to talk about other brands. This is just my experience with DJI. Now, depending on which model you get, some of them do have obstacle avoidance, where there's these little sensors that look like cameras on different sides of the drone, and those can be used to prevent the drone from crashing into objects, but it's not perfect. Really small tree branches it might miss, and not every drone has detection in every direction that you are probably hoping for. For example, the Air 2 only has detection below, behind, and in front of it. Now, if you opt for the Air 2S, it does have sensing below, behind, in front of it, and pointed up. So it has 4 directions of obstacle avoidance. Now, the Mini 3 Pro only has detection in 3 directions, forward, back, and downward. And the Mavic 3, or what a lot of people call the Mavic 3 Pro, is omnidirectional, which means every direction. Now, I have since bought the Mavic 3 Pro, and I actually uploaded a video using that drone recently. I'm not going to talk about that drone a whole lot because that is sort of on a whole other level. It costs a lot more. Just the drone itself is over $2,000. But if there's interest in this video, I might end up making a video on that too. My intention isn't to make any sort of in-depth reviews of drones the way I have on this channel with dash cameras, but it really depends on if people are interested in seeing it or not. Now, one of the other important features people talk about often is the cameras. Now, what a lot of people aren't aware of is these drones use a device called a gimbal on the front, and that gimbal is what stabilizes the camera, because whenever people see footage, they're usually impressed at how steady the footage is, and that's because that gimbal can control the camera movements in 3 directions. And each of these drones that I've been talking about also have GPS, and using GPS and the downward obstacle detection, it can allow the drone to hold steady and hover in place and give you really steady footage when you're in the air. And even when you're flying or moving left or right, the gimbal is going to keep that camera level. Or I won't get too in depth with this, but you can actually have the camera follow your movements left and right as if you're flying like a bird. That's FPV mode. I'm not really going to cover that in this video. Now, speaking of GPS, all of these DJI drones currently do use GPS. And as I said, that is how it helps keep the drone steady while you're in the air. So if you let go of your joysticks, it will just stay steady. It'll hover in place and it won't move much more than, as it's trying to balance with the wind. And a lot of these drones can actually withstand quite a lot of wind. If it is too windy, your drone will alert you that it's too windy and that it can cause issues. One of the features that the GPS allows these drones to have is an automatic return to home function. So if the battery's low, or if you manually start the return to home, the drone will fly back to its takeoff location. More on that later. So guys, I'm throwing all these features out at you because basically all of these features are why I was so excited when I started flying mine and realized how accessible this hobby could be for anyone. Obviously, the price is going to be the biggest barrier for most people. Let's take a look at a typical takeoff and landing. So I took my Mavic Air 2 out to a parking lot near a park, and I set it down on the ground, went through the startup sequence. You have to turn the power on the drone, turn the power on the controller. Now, the controller that comes with a lot of drones is this controller that you put your phone into here. Now, I'm filming with my phone right now, so don't have one to show you, but it'll come with USB-C, Lightning or micro USB cable adapter. So you put your phone in here, plug it in, turn that on. You'll download the DJI Fly More app, and once you get it connected, it should automatically start displaying your camera's live feed onto your phone. But before you take off, it's good to have some sort of takeoff checklist or safety checklist. You can Google them on the internet and find some pretty basic checklists to go through before you take off. One of those items on that list is going to be to make sure you have enough satellites before you take off. Now on the top right of the screen, you'll see the satellite count, and if it's not high enough, it'll be in the red. You can take off without enough, but that return to home function depends on you getting enough satellites to pinpoint your location. You're also going to want to make sure your other safety features are set to levels that you want. Your object avoidance can have you either try to just avoid obstacles, or it can just stop, and then you can manually fly around the obstacle if you choose to. But there's also different forms of return to home. It depends on the drone, but typically you basically set a height that the drone is going to fly up to before it returns back to its takeoff location. Using the joysticks, there's going to be several different modes, but the default mode is going to be where they call this mode 2, and the different modes go back to RC planes apparently. The default on DJI drones is mode 2, where pushing up is going to increase your power, increase your thrust, and it's going to start flying straight up. And of course, down is going to be the opposite. Now, going left or right is going to control the yaw, which means it's going to spin left or right. And then this joystick is going to be forward, backwards, and left or right. And by left or right, I mean on the same plane, it's going to go left or right like that. I actually changed it to mode 3, which growing up, as you know, I was born in the 80s, grew up in the 90s. I played a lot of first-person shooters on consoles back when Halo first came out, and that sort of standardized first-person shooters. So mode 3 is basically what I just said flipped. So when I fly this around as if this is controlling, my character in a first-person shooter, going forward, backwards, strafing left or right, and spinning left or right. But instead of looking up or down, it's thrust up or down. So that's how I prefer it. So on the top of the controller, there is a record button that's going to be for video or photos. On this side, we have a wheel, and that's going to control your gimbal pointing up or down. Now, a lot of this is customizable, so I'm not going to go into every possible option, but one of the default options for this function button is you can have it set to automatically tilt the gimbal straight or straight down. I'm not sure if that was the default, but that's one of the functions I use now. Or, depending on which drone you have and what mode you're filming in, you can hold this and scroll up or down or left or right to zoom in or out. Here we do have the return to home button, the power button, camera button switches between video or photography. And down here we have Cine, normal, or sport. Now, normal is what I fly in most of the time. If you fly in sport, you are not going to get the object detection, so you have to make sure if you're expecting object detection to work, put that on your little startup checklist to make sure you're in normal. Cine, which used to be called tripod mode on previous controllers, is basically just a slower flight mode, so it helps you capture cinematic video a lot easier. This is just going to be a quick flight, but you're allowed to fly up to 400 feet AGL, which is above ground level. Now, it is worth pointing out, even if you're not doing this for commercial reasons, if you're not trying to make money, you do have to get your trust permit. The trust permit is a permit that you get through the FAA by paying like $5 only, and you take a really brief test, and that covers things like, you can only fly to 400 feet above ground. You aren't supposed to fly over crowds of people, things like that. It's really easy, but there is an exception where if you are flying recreational, as in you're not using the footage to make money, if your drone is under 250 grams, you do not even need that trust permit. But I would highly recommend going through it anyways, because it does teach you some of the most basic rules of flying a drone. And just because your drone is under 250 grams, it doesn't exempt you from those rules if you do break them. Now, if you are flying commercially, you have to get your Part 107 license through the FAA, which is a 60-question test. You have to take it at an FAA testing center, and I did personally do that. I took an online class, Pilot Institute. The class was about 12 to 14 hours of videos and maybe 4 hours of quizzes and practice tests. And, I passed it. I thought, it was worth it for me. But if you're not going to be flying for any commercial reasons, don't worry about that. But I would still recommend getting that trust permit. So say now you've flown around, taken some beautiful footage, taken the photos you wanted, and you want to fly back home. Now, you can just fly back home manually. I do that a lot of times, actually, because I just enjoy flying it around. But as I said before, you can hit that return to home function, and it will automatically turn around and fly back to where you took off. One tip I can give you is when you take off, fly to about 10 or 20 feet above your takeoff point and let it sit there for about 10 seconds. Now, I can't confirm this, but several other YouTubers have claimed this. Apparently, if you give it time to recognize where it took off from, it'll be more precise when it comes down for a landing. So those are a lot of the basic features. A lot of this footage I took my very first day flying, and it's sort of what got me hooked. Like, as soon as I was getting brave enough to fly over water, I was able to get really cool footage. For example, looking down at this fishing boat, which were my friends. They were aware that I was filming them, by the way. But also, one feature that a lot of these drones have, not just DJI, are these automatic modes. DJI calls theirs quick shots or master shots, but it allows you to get some really cool shots that are really good for novices. One of them is called rocket ship, where it will start at a certain lower elevation and then shoot straight up further into the sky. One, you can just circle around an object, and the software is smart enough where you can just use your finger on your phone to select a person or a vehicle, and it'll lock on and start rotating around it. There's spiral mode, a boomerang mode on some drones. I personally don't really use them that often anymore, but it definitely, for the first few weeks, was a lot of fun. But as you get better, sometimes it's more fun to try to do these shots manually anyways. And also, you have to consider, like, for example, the Air 2 doesn't have side sensors. So one way a lot of people have crashed their drones is they're using these automatic modes, whether it's circling around a subject, and they're forgetting that you can't see to your right or left, and it flies, into a tree, or flies up and back into a tree. So you got to be careful with that. Now, another automatic function is spotlight, where you can circle an object or person or whatever, and then have it automatically fly left or right at whatever speed you set. And then there's also the follow mode, which is really good for following people or vehicles. Again, you select the person or vehicle, and with the Air 2, it just follows behind it. But with more advanced models, they can follow an object from the side or even in the front. These are all really cool features that I personally didn't even know about before I started researching these. Now, these cameras have custom, manual, pro settings, whatever you want to call them. I'm not a photographer or not a professional photographer. I've dabbled in just the white balance and shutter speed, but I can't really comment on it because I would not be giving good advice. But it is something I am trying to learn currently. And one of the items that comes with the Fly More combos is some ND filters. Now, I'm just learning about this, but these ND filters can be used to add motion blur to your footage. And some people might think, why would you want motion blur? Like, I want 4K 60 frames per second. I want it to look super high frame rate. But the problem with that is cinematic footage doesn't necessarily look like a video game. It doesn't look like 60 or 120 FPS. And actually, that can make the footage look jittery. So whenever you see GoPro footage in commercials, they're usually, or I'm assuming that they're using some sort of ND filter to add a little bit of that motion blur and get that really cool fluid motion in their high-speed footage. So that's something, as you get more and more into this hobby, you can start learning about and getting prettier or better footage, which is what I want to do. So as I said, I ended up getting the Mavic 3. The Mavic 3 is what people call a prosumer model, where it's more than just a consumer model because it costs an arm and a leg. The Fly More combo currently costs $2,850. The batteries alone are like $250 each, or over $200. I can't remember exactly, but it is a highly advanced drone. Not for everyone because the highly prohibitive cost, but I thought it was something I would really get into, and I thought it could also help me make more interesting videos for my YouTube channel, or just in general inspire me to get motivated to film more. So guys, I think I talked too much. Let me know what you guys think. Do you guys have a drone? Have you considered buying one? If you have any questions, guys, comment down below. I will answer as many questions as I can. I'll provide down in the description the drones that I recommend and the prices and why I recommend them. I currently don't intend on getting any drones from other brands, but I'm not saying other brands are bad. I just really have enjoyed these DJI drones and plan on getting a couple more in the near future. So again, hope this video is helpful. I hope this can help more people get inspired to get into this hobby, because it's a really fun hobby and it's been a lot of enjoyment for me. So if you like this video or my other videos, of course, I'd appreciate it if you would like and subscribe. And as usual, drive safe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.